We're really excited to present the session today, and met a variety of stakeholders that have joined and are joining as we speak. And over the course of next 1 hour, we'll be walking you through the lean data approach to impact measurement, with a special focus on 60 decibels engagement with Igor Foundation. The session will be co-presented by Varun and me, and we can start with the introduction. So, Varun, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Prashant. Hi, everyone. First of all, thanks, Andy Matrix and Prashant, for inviting me and eGov to be part of this session. I look after strategy and partnerships at eGov. It's been 2 years, and it's been an exciting journey to build an open digital ecosystem for urban governance. And we've been working in with almost 15 states and 30 plus partners. And we'll be sharing some of that story today. Over to you, Prashant.
Perfect. Thanks, Varun. And yeah, like I'm Prashant Maheshwari. I'm a senior associate in the 60 Decibels India office. It's also been an exciting journey for us at 60DP since our spin out of Acumen in 2019. We've really sort of established ourselves as an independent organization which is solely focusing on impact measurement. And yeah, and I'm excited to sort of showcase you some of the work that we have done with actually eGov, one of the exciting companies. And yeah, so happy to sort of get started. Uh, Great. In terms of format, we'll be spending around 40 minutes presenting, and we would love to sort of, set aside a Q&A session both in between the session and one Q&A session towards the end. We will let you know when we're open for questions. But meanwhile, if you do have, any sort of thoughts that you do want to share, please feel free to sort of drop them in the chat box. Um, in addition, we have also tried to keep the session interactive. So there are some quizzes and polls that you should look out for. And we'll sort of give you also, we'll sort of give you a heads up, especially for those as those come up. Great. So on that note, I want to sort of cover the agenda at maybe slightly at the high level. Our presentation today will look at to cover three broad topics. We'll start off by setting the context around the state of impact measurement and its constraints today. We'll then introduce a lean data approach and highlight our engagement with eGov, walking you through the different steps in the execution of a lean data study, as well as focusing on the outcomes of the study. And lastly, we'll close out with our vision of where we think impact measurement is headed. Great. So on that note, let's kick us off by launching a simple poll. The question for the audience that I really have is, what words come to your mind when you think about impact measurement? I'll give us about 15 to 20 seconds to respond. So please drop your answer in the chat box. Uh, yeah.
Prashant, just wanted to check if you can see the responses that are coming in through chat.
I can. Yeah. Thank you, Simon.
Okay. Right.
Perfect. I mean, I think people can continue dropping the responses, but I think I have got a very good sense of where people are at. And I'm happy to park this just for a moment and come back to these responses in a couple of slides later. Um, I want to move on to sort of, focusing on a quote of Sir Ronald Cohen, who really needs no introduction in the field of impact investing. He said, and I quote, that impact investing means investing in companies, organizations, and funds with the intention to generate a measurable, beneficial, social, or environmental impact in addition to financial return. Now, I'm certain that since the time he said that, various industry projections have predicted that globally over $500 billion will be flowing from impact funds, foundation, and institutional investors into social businesses and not for profits to make a positive impact on the lives of the most vulnerable. And for that reason, solely that reason, it is imperative that outcomes of these investments are measured. But it's not as simple as just saying that, right? Like and to draw a parallel, let's look at the assessment of financial performance. These assessments are standardized, governed by best practice, and most importantly, they're audited by third parties. And all in all, this means that from a process perspective, the task for any organization who needs to measure their financial performance is fairly straightforward, meaning they know what to report, how to report it, when to report it, and how frequently to report it, right? But when it comes to social measuring the social return, some of you in the audience have already described this as crucial. Who pays for it? It's sort of cumbersome. It's challenging. It's complex, and I would say that a lot of what has been shared in the chat box validates our own observations and understanding of impact measurement. We think that in its current form, impact measurement is disparate, meaning that it lacks standardization, it is unaudited often, it is expensive, it is time consuming, and it is burdensome. And at the structural level, we like to think of it as two major constraints. The first one being a lack of clarity in what should be collected. And the second thing is how should it be collected? But having said that, 60DB has observed that in recent years, some of the donors and social enterprises have invested time and effort in building an impact framework. And while some of these frameworks are exhaustive and potentially answer questions about what should be collected, there are still constraints to actually collecting the data. Now, before I move any further, I would love for audience, especially the donors and the social enterprises that are with us today, to take a quick poll that should be on your screen right about now. It's a simple yes or no question. The question asks you if you are currently or if you have in the past validated your or your grantees or investees' impact performance via a third party. I will give us about 15 seconds to 20 seconds to respond. Perfect. I see that we have some responses coming in, but yeah, we can pause because I think we have roughly a sense of what people are saying. And overall, what we are observing is the fact that 25% of all people who are on this call with us today have said that they have validated via third party, whereas 75% have not validated their impact performance via any third party evaluations. And this is very sort of close to our own observations. And on that note, what I want to sort of focus on is the fact that if third parties are not sort of evaluating and auditing the impact performance, it almost always means that there is a heavy reliance on the investee and the grantees to supply social impact data, which for all reasons is often unvalidated, unaudited. It is likely to be only quantitative, focusing on only breadth of impact. Sometimes it could even be anecdotal based on field visits or experiences of field staff. And sometimes it could just even be a proxy for what is actually intended for collection. And so all in all, we have seen that there are three primary approaches that that people have taken up in the impact measurement industry. And I'm happy to sort of go over each of these slowly. The first one is the output approach, which basically entails collecting key numbers that are easy for the enterprise to measure. And these are typically how many people you serve, where do they live, if their product or service is still working or active. And while there are pros to this approach, which is basically that it gives an insight into the breadth of impact, the biggest con is that it doesn't tell us anything about the depth of impact. Secondly, it's a laundry list approach, which is asking enterprise to collect metrics that matter to the investor or donor. And the pro of such an approach is that there is access to more impact-related numbers. For example, if children use solar lights to study after installation of a solar home system in their home, and the biggest con is that it's a logistical nightmare, meaning the enterprise has to go above and beyond to install mechanisms for it to collect this kind of data, which also means that some enterprises are just not able to collect the data and often return no data or really bad quality data. And the third approach is mainly the academic approach, which is what many of us will be well versed with. It entails using rigorous research to understand the impact, which is typically in the form of RCT or a randomized controlled trial. And the pro of such an approach is the fact that it is able to collect high quality data with a comparison group, and it provides a sense of depth of impact. But the biggest con is that RCTs just take a very long time and they're very expensive. A nascent social enterprise does not have the time or money to waste for 5 years for a $500,000 report. So that really brings me to what 60 decibels is really doing about this, because easy to criticize others, but what's more difficult is to actually come up with something that potentially works for you. And so at 60 decibels, we are trying to sort of equip investors and social enterprises with the impact on customer experience data that ensures that they stay accountable to the end customer and have what they need to make key impact-oriented direct decisions. And therefore, our work is designed to make impact measurement fulfill these three critical gaps, and which include give you a high sense of depth and meaningfulness of impact, which is what I've referred to as depth in the slide. Second, provide high quality data and insight, which is what is quality in the slide. And the third thing is that it should be easy, that there should be time and cost efficiencies for the social enterprise of today. And so what all of this really means is that at the heart of 60 decibels approach is listening to the people whose lives we are trying to improve. To us, this is a priority, and we believe that all social enterprises and the intervention should have its people at the center of this design. And we do this by speaking directly to beneficiaries, by conducting surveys in the languages that they're most comfortable in, by phone or online, meaning that a lot of the data collection that we undertake is remote. And to date, we have worked with 300 organizations and have spoken to over 150,000 people around the world. Our repeatable and rapid approach to gathering impact indicators and customer insights provides our clients with genuine benchmarks of impact performance. These benchmarks enable a deeper understanding of impact, meaning we try to answer the question that helps separate what is good impact from what is great impact. And we believe that the power of data-backed decision making, and therefore we work to provide actionable data to the clients that we work with. Just want to pause there because I'm conscious that I may not have come onto the slide on time. So if people want to quickly read through, please feel free to. Perfect. So moving on, I want to showcase this slide, which mainly just marks some of our progress in terms of numbers. And for me personally, the highlight has been the fact that we have had the chance to work with about 300 different social enterprises, which have been across sectors, subsectors, geographies, and engaged a variety of different stakeholders by interviewing and working with these 300 companies. Right now, the important thing to keep in mind, however, is the fact that we don't just collect data for the sake of collecting it, without asking what it really will measure and what will the donors in the social enterprises really learn from it. And so this approach ensures that we prioritize indicators that will truly be value adding. We don't wish to provide a laundry list of some useful and some not so useful indicators. Over time, through our conversations with a variety of different donors and social enterprises, we have been able to cement on some of our core indicators, which we have considered to be, absolutely important for impact measurement. And a sample of these have been provided on the screen right now. And so if I have to go over each of these one by one, I would say that in a typical lean data study, we will aim to answer some or all of these questions. The questions that we typically answer is the social enterprise reaching the beneficiaries it intends to reach? Is the social enterprise providing a unique service offering in an underserved market? Are beneficiaries satisfied with the offering? And or are they facing challenges, and do they have any suggestions for improvements? And is the offering impacting the beneficiaries' overall quality of life? Now, I'm conscious that what I've done is really provided a high level about what 60 decibels is and the lean data approach, but I promise you that we will get into the details of the execution process in a short time. For now, I'll hand over to Varun, who will introduce a wonderful organization called eGov Foundation. So Varun, over to you.
Thanks, Prashant. So before I jump into introducing our work, I thought I'll take a moment to speak about the opportunity we are trying to solve. So if Prashant, if you can move to the next slide. We all, I think many of us are aware India is chasing a big ambition of growing into a $10 trillion economy. And in this growth story, urbanization is rapidly playing a very important role. I think multiple estimates suggest that more than half of India's population will live in urban India in the next 10 to 20 years, and almost 70% of the GDP will be contributed from urban India. So while majority of the population will be there, I think the challenge that urban India is facing is they're grappling with chronic weak capacities, right? And also low revenue that they generate, low self-income that they generate, leading to poor ease of living and ease of doing business. And if you move on to the next slide, Prashant, uh, considering India is considering India is a very diverse and complex country, and incrementally fixing governance in 4,000 cities is going to be next to impossible. So urban transformation is required at speed and scale, right? And with this in mind, eGov was founded, and sorry, Prashant, if you can move to the next slide. eGov was founded in 2003 by Nandan Nilekani and Shrikant Nadamuni. The vision was to catalyze urban transformation and enhance ease of living. And I'm stressing on the word catalyze because we aspire to work with the ecosystem to achieve the transformation that we intend to. And the current mission that we took on about 4 years back was to embed an open digital infrastructure to improve governance in 2,000 cities. And this open digital infrastructure we call Digit basically helps digitize some of these governance services for the government so that they can provide better service delivery to citizens. So with this journey, I will quickly show a snapshot of where we are. We are almost working in over 2,400 cities, right? Some areas completed, some areas in progress, almost impacting 170 million citizens. 3 million grievances have been filed over the years. Over 2 billion revenue has been collected on the platform, and almost 6.5 million properties are registered. I'll just pause here. This is a quick introduction about eGov. If there are any questions, again, for Prashant and me, before we move to the next section where we introduce our approach at eGov to impact measurement. All right, I think we can move, I think, yeah, you can use the chat box. Sorry, you can use the chat box for any questions you have. I'll just move on to the next section, and then we can take the Q&A at the end. So the approach that we have taken to impact measurement. Oh, sorry, I think there is a question, but I guess we'll take that at the end now. So the approach that we've taken to impact measurement is basically twofold. One is we track the whole mission impact, where we're trying to achieve scale and speed of embedding an open digital infra. And we consider that as important as working with the states directly to understand the depth of impact. So essentially covering the both aspects of breadth and depth of impact. Going to the next slide, Prashant. So generally, generally measuring the mission impact has been slightly easy for us because the real-time data that is collected on the platform, as well our own key results that we track within the organization, helps us achieve our mission impact goals. But working with the state program teams to collect the impact measurement on state depth is been very difficult. And some of the challenges that we face, one is that the data lies or is owned by the state, which is very difficult to aggregate at a national level, right? And a complete picture of impact requires both real-time data as well as perception feedback, for which you need a good intent from the state sponsorship. And third, some of the numbers that help us realize what change to make actually is dependent on some of the ecosystem players, and therefore driving that change with the ecosystem is can be challenging at a state level. So these are some of the challenges that we face measuring depth of impact versus easily trying to approach the breadth of impact. Just to give you a sense of what we mean by breadth or mission impact versus state program impact, I'll show you a few examples, and I'll quickly jump through the slides. So when I say mission impact, what we're tracking is how do we make a scalable digit platform that ensures high performance and ensures privacy and security by design, orchestrating a diverse ecosystem, so tracking the number of partners that use the platform and also the number of partners that co-create solutions using the platform. And finally, how what we track is embedding the platform at scale across multiple states and cities. Similarly, while tracking the state program impact indicators, this essentially is trying to measure the depth of impact. And here we work closely with the ecosystem partners as well as state sponsorship. And what we mean essentially here is how is access being inclusive? How is it improving for citizens? How is quality of life and service improving for citizens? Is there an improvement in capacity and efficiency for the government employees and administrators? Are they able to sustain financially through increased revenue? Are there transparent accounting practices? And finally, are they using the platform and open digital infra to create innovative solutions that create impact for citizens? So this is just to give you a sense of what we really mean by mission versus state program. So while trying to tackle this challenge of how do we assess the depth of impact at a state level, and if we move to the next slide, what we essentially did was to partner with Lean Data, with 60 decibel for a lean data survey, and it was essentially funded by Omidyar Network, and we're very thankful for that. The idea was to complement some of the real-time data that eGov tracks through the platform and in partnership with the state, along with trying to get the real perception on the ground through this lean data survey. So, I'll hand it over to Prashant to explain the whole process and the outcomes that we try to achieve using this methodology.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Varun. Yeah, and it's been an exciting journey, and so happy to sort of jump right into it to sort of first introduce to you the process of lean data. The first and the foremost is to thing to know about lean data is that we see it as a 5-step process, out of which the first step is basically defining your organization goals and what you're looking for. And it is at this stage that 60 decibel engages heavily with the client, in this case, both over their network and eGov, to understand the priorities that they're looking to sort of understand and fulfill. And so uh, that leads us to then sort of lead us to the second step, which is around designing the survey itself, and what, or rather what a lot of us would relate as, picking the right indicators and metrics for the survey. And it is in this, and so it is at this step we sort of select and develop the right questions to sort of measure the goals that are listed to us by the client in the first step. And we use a standardized survey tools in combination with company specific questions to create that right survey. And in a short while, I'll actually also show you some of these metrics that we collect, along with metrics that we can customize and create, for the client specifically. In the third step is when we sort of take the whole process completely off the client's plate, and we sort of execute the study by actually collecting the data. Um, the whole data collection process, which is basically hiring of researchers, training them, certifying them, managing the data collection, managing the quality of what sort of data that's coming in, is all taken up by 60 decibels. And it is at this stage that that we collect the data over phone, by speaking to the customers or the beneficiaries in the local language that they're most comfortable in. After that comes the analysis stage. This is where we sort of try to make the most amount of sense of the data. And this is where we typically deep dive and identify the main insights that can be sort of presented to the client. Um, And lastly, we sort of create, we present those insights in a digestible manner such that the client can actually use the data, because as I said, we don't want to collect data just for the sake of collecting data. It's really about how can the data be useful for the company, for the donor, and potentially, can be used to do both prove impact as well as improve the company, is the framework that we typically try to follow. And again, and I feel this is an iterative process over time, which is the fact that we don't think listening to customers that you work with is a one-time job. Data collection has to be done over time. It's about, just as business models can change over time, so can the people's needs be, and so can their experiences, and it's sort of all the more important for us to therefore keep data collection iterative over time. um, Great. So I want to sort of do not exactly a role play, but we'll sort of kind of reconstruct the whole lean data study with eGov in a way. And so let's start off with defining goals. And this is the place where I'll hand off to Varun to sort of introduce the product and the service a little bit, and also talk through their main objectives for which they want to sign up for a lean data study.
Yeah, thanks, Prashant. So I think, like I mentioned earlier, when we were tracking the mission goals, we realized implementing a solution was one bit of it, but trying to track the depth of impact, which needs considerable effort from the ecosystem, was very important. So, and this was the case that we used with 60 Decibel. In Andhra Pradesh, we launched an app called Puruseva along with the state. Basically, Puruseva, the mobile app, actually helps citizens lodge complaints and also pay their taxes. This was launched statewide in Andhra Pradesh in 2016. And the idea was to understand, after using this for a couple of years, has access or the perception of government actually increased for citizens? Have they started realizing better service delivery? And at the same time, for government employees, has it actually overall improved their quality of work as well as their efficiency? So with this purpose, we partnered with 60 Decibel to do the study. Yeah, over to you, Prashant.
Oops, sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Varun. That makes a lot of sense. And so, as Varun said, we had a very sort of clear understanding of what they want to achieve, which led us to the next step, which was designing the survey. Actually, now the thing to know about the way we approach survey design, and this may actually answer some of the questions which are coming up in the chat box, is the fact that um, based on the objectives which is listed by the client, we design the survey, and that is always the guiding document for us. The core to us research design and is sort of capturing the beneficiary experience by following the beneficiary's journey with the company, which is who are they, which is what's the gender, age, poverty profile, dedication levels, etc., to how they heard about the company, or rather how were they acquired, and what was their motivation to sign up for the company's services. We then move on to understanding the customer, the beneficiary's level of experience or their satisfaction with the product or the service, to then understanding the impact that they have felt on their life, and lastly, what can be done by the company to actually retain the customer and sort of build that loyal base of customers and beneficiaries both. um, and so what I've shown on the screen right now is the fact that we have covered just one stakeholder, which is the citizens. But as Varun was talking about, this study actually entailed speaking to two stakeholders. One was the citizens who were using the Puruseva app to actually file complaints and grievances about about local civic issues. But it also entailed interviewing government officials, because they were an important part of the value chain. And as people whose quality of work and efficiency was directly getting affected, it was important that we get a holistic view of the system, and that's a decision to sort of interview both the stakeholders. But what you see on the screen right now is the survey questionnaire we designed for just one stakeholder, which is the citizens. Uh, Now, I can sort of come back to some of these metrics, and you don't worry if you've not gotten a good sort of read at all of those, because we will be sort of presenting some of these again, and that's when I'll also sort of take you through the metrics itself. So don't worry. Uh, after the survey design stage, what happens is the fact that we sort of take over, as I just said, and we sort of collect the data. And all of this data collection was done over phone. It was done by researchers hired and trained by us. It was done in Telugu, which is the local language of Andhra Pradesh. The data collection roughly took about 3 to 4 weeks of time, and one interview sort of was about 12 to 15 minutes of time on average. Um, Now, because this service was provided statewide to like lakhs of people in the state of Andhra Pradesh, we deployed a stratified random sampling approach for us to get like a representative data set. And so after doing all of that, we were able to sort of pick up phone numbers that we had to call, and we overall from that calling we had a response rate of about 40%, which means that out of every 10 numbers that we called, 4 of them were successful. uh, and and as I also, I think as Varun sort of had mentioned earlier, the study was done over 2 years, once in 2018 in the month of March and once again in 2019 in the month of August. And across these two studies, we managed to interview 660 citizens and about 252 government employees, with all collection being done over phone, and roughly taking about 3 to 4 weeks of time. Uh, and once we sort of finished data collection and sort of got all of that in place, we then sort of come on to the most interesting bits of the whole lean data process, which is actually to sort of analyze the data and present the most tangible and suitable the most relevant findings, rather, not suitable. It cannot always be suitable, but it can always be relevant. um, so on that note, what I'm sharing on the screen right now is what a typical performance snapshot slide looks like for our clients. The slide provides a bunch of different things. The first thing is that it provides a performance across key indicators, which is profile, impact, challenges, net promoter score, alternatives. But it also provides, benchmarks of that performance against the relevant subsector, sector, or the geography. In this case, we have benchmarked eGov's performance to our benchmarks in India, which is basically a database of 65 companies in which we've interviewed 13,000 customers, and we're able to sort of benchmark how eGov is performing vis-a-vis a lot of other sort of social impact enterprises in India. Um, and we have provided these benchmarks in the form of quintile, which I'll shortly cover. But I want to first start off by focusing on the insights itself, and sort of talking a bit about what we learned by speaking to these different stakeholders, particularly the citizen users for now. Um, we first try to understand the extent of the overall inclusivity of the Pura Seva app. What's important to keep in mind is that this app is something that can be used by anyone in the state of Andhra Pradesh. But we want to understand that even though it's available for everyone, is everyone even using it? And if not, then what are the reasons to the lack of inclusivity of the app? And understanding that was one sort of outcome of the study. And we overall found that the Pura Seva app has an inclusivity ratio of 0.51. Now, what this number really means is the fact that we assess inclusivity by using a statistical approach designed by IPA called Poverty Probability Index. Some of you may actually commonly know this as a PPI. As a direct outcome of PPI, we were able to compute the poverty focus, meaning the percentage of Pura Seva's clients that are living below World Bank's international poverty line. And we were then able to sort of compare this to the national poverty rate, which is that of India, or we could also compare that to the state poverty rate, which is that of Andhra Pradesh. And by using the two sort of numbers, we then sort of compute an inclusivity ratio. The way to interpret inclusivity ratio is the fact that a number less than 1 implies that the company is serving wealthier users than the national average, whereas an inclusivity greater than 1 implies that the company is serving poorer users than the national average. And so that was one finding, which is the fact that overall the people who are using the Pura Seva app seem to be wealthier than the average population residing in the state of Andhra Pradesh. The second thing we learned was the fact that in terms of usage, even though there were two big usage for the app, the fact that people could file complaints and that people could file taxes, majority of the people were using the app only to file complaints. And so the usage was definitely skewed more so, to raising complaints. Now, this was not surprising because eGov also had this data, but what we were able to sort of understand again is like, at least people's primary motivations to use the app and the rationale behind that. we also try to understand if there are other alternatives available to people, alternatives to Pura Seva around them. And but what we did find was that 82% of all the people we interviewed could not find a good alternative to Pura Seva, which means that Pura Seva was sort of a product which is probably unique in itself and working in an underserved market. Um, and moving on from there, from the profile indicators, we also try to understand people's satisfaction with Pura Seva. And the most important metric that we use to understand satisfaction and loyalty is the Net Promoter Score. Now, Net Promoter Score is a very well-known metric that is used across industries globally, to sort of give you a range of the numbers. It can be anything from -100 to 100. And some of the most well-performing companies on customer care, such as Apple and Netflix and a bunch of other global brands, have a Net Promoter Score of typically 60 to 70. And anything about 50 is considered excellent, while anything between 30 to 50 is considered good as a Net Promoter Score. But what we observed in eGov's case was that overall Net Promoter Score was quite low. It was -27. However, when we ask detractors, which are people who give a rating of 0 to 6 on the Net Promoter Score question, uh, when we asked detractors why they were dissatisfied, they explained that it was to do with the ineffective or the delayed resolution to the complaints that were raised, and while only a handful of users actually had any complaints with Pura Seva itself. And what was interesting to therefore note was the fact that when you asked the customer about their perception about the product, they were not able to segregate Pura Seva the app from the resolution of the complaint, which was under direct control of the government. Right, for them it was one service and they couldn't separate it. But therefore what came in handy was the open-ended qualitative data, which is what 60 decibels tries to always collect. Because we were able to make sense of the low dissatisfaction and say that, to what extent was it Pura Seva's sort of doing versus how much of it was the state government's doing, because they were not resolving these issues in time. And so that was something interesting to note. We also asked people challenges with respect to Pura Seva, and 72% had reported no challenges whatsoever. But the most interesting thing that I think that stood out was the impact itself, which was the fact that um, um, eGov's hypothesis was about changing access to government and also improving the quality of delivery of services. And we found that 74% of users agreed that they had better access to the government, while 60% agreed that they had better quality of services being delivered by the state government. And all of this culminated into the fact that 48% of all users felt that the quality of life had improved, particularly because they felt that the app was easy and convenient to use. Because in the absence of Pura Seva, a person who had to make a complaint would actually need to go to the government department by foot, or whatever it may be, and actually spend their time of the day to do that. But today, having the app meant that there was ease and convenience of access. There was also timely resolution of complaints, which may not have been the case earlier, which people thought directly affected the quality of their surroundings. Because if people had severe garbage problems in their locality, they were able to get the result easily and in a timely manner, which actually improved their overall quality of life. And we were able to understand that very clearly from the users. Now, moving on, we also try to understand the impact on the government employees. And what we found there was also that the picture was a lot more positive for the government employees, because 96% of all government employees said that the quality of work improved because of Pura Seva. And what it basically meant that they were saving a lot more time and effort. They had found an efficient way to do their job, and there was shorter turnaround time in fixing the issues. Um, what this also meant was the fact that the Net Promoter Score was 49, which is almost nearing excellence, which meant that the government employees were quite likely to recommend Pura Seva to another government employee for their work. And overall, there were 63% who reported no challenges, while 54% said that the overall time they spent doing documentation and reporting had gone down. And overall, they were observing savings up to 11 hours per week. And so these were the sort of outcomes that we observed for all the government employees. Um, Moving on, though, I know there will be a bunch of questions around this, but I'm happy to sort of take those towards the end. We then sort of come on to the next stage, which is the fact that which involves sharing the results and actually discussing them internally and preparing an action plan with the company. Uh, and what all of this basically meant that was the fact that the data in itself is something which is not good enough, right? The data is as good as what use it is for the company. And so I want to now sort of hand over to Varun to talk about how eGov managed to use some of the data that we collected.
Yeah, thanks, Prashant. In the interest of time, I think if you can populate the whole slide, I'll try to sum it up. Yeah, so I think what in the first round of the study, what we observed that some of the feedback was on how you can improve the app itself, right? And we've taken that suggestions and try. And for example, we understand that some of the complaint categorization was a little complex, so we tried to improve that. Also, citizens felt that they would like to have contact details of the responsible person from the government, and we try to tag that into the app, and we've actually implemented some of this in other states as well. So overall, what it helped is improve the app interface, make it more customer centric, and increase accountability and transparency among employees and officials. Moving into the next slide. And the second study, what we observed that this time around, it was less on the product. And I think the maturity of the implementation suggested that now there were more program level interventions. And the lean data study was one of the catalysts that helped the government actually implement this quite impressive program across the state, hiring almost 1.5 lakh volunteers and trying to cover door-to-door campaign so that they can actually get the services done at the doorstep in terms of filing a complaint or registering probably a license or permission, and also collecting taxes. So, and in fact, even at a service delivery level, what we understood that a lot of the capacity over 4 years was improved, and the actual SLA dropped from 25 days to 5 days. And I think such studies actually help in trying to catalyze that change even within the government. And Prashant, you want to take this on the overall outcomes?
Definitely. And I think what is important was the fact that while what Varun shared, a lot of the outcomes was again would fit into the improve framework, which is prove versus improve, and improved was the outcome of was some of the direct outcome. But we also found that the study was helpful in validating some of their own impact thesis, and maybe Varun can share a little bit more about how that impacted their scale up to other states, etc.
Yeah, so I think a lot of this study we actually repeatedly use among funders as well as potential states, and I think this study really impresses them to see what the actual on-ground impact is, apart from digitizing and creating efficiency in the system. So I think with that narration, we were able to onboard multiple states. Of course, one of the catalysts for onboarding, but I think it really helped in creating that extra push to the narration.
Perfect. Uh, Great. And I think, an important part of the process is being iterative, as I mentioned earlier. And what it basically means is that it's important to sort of repeat this over time, because listening to your customers cannot be a one-time exercise. Organizations should prioritize listening with dedicated frequency, simply because as times change, so could people's needs. And we already observed that how the nature of the feedback that users had to share evolved from one study to the other. Furthermore, when each priority feels equally important, feedback loops with customers can help companies prioritize what ought to be most important for them. And for all those reasons, we advocate doing this as an annual exercise, which some of our serious clients already do sort of take up. Um, The second thing is also about redesigning scope to reflect some of the shift in priorities. And what it basically means that, as the government has focused a lot on improving service delivery, the next lean data study could also investigate why only 10% of the users actually use the app for paying taxes. And we could sort of ask a lot more modules around financial behavior to understand why people choose not to sort of transact and pay taxes via the app. And the third thing is also about deepening our own understanding with an added layer of nuance. And what it basically means is that we currently have understood profile from the income sense, from the poverty sense, from gender, region, and other demographic. But in the next study, we're also aim to sort of understand in inclusivity from a disability perspective by asking a module around disability and understanding to what extent is eGov inclusive around those parameters. Uh, Now, overall, I am conscious that we are probably almost at time, and I do want to hear questions. And so the last thing I want to cover today is the key takeaways, which is the fact that in there is often a misconception, rather that organizations can only prioritize one or the other, and typically they tend to sort of prioritize breadth of impact. But I think what needs to be sort of internalized a bit more is the impact of actually measuring depth of impact, and what it could do to actually scale up the breadth of impact also. And that, I thought, is Igor was a great example for us to showcase that, because with the evidence that they were able to create and put together, it actually helped them scale up some of the work. At least it was a catalyst in doing that. The second thing to also keep in mind is the fact that data has not only helped improving impact but also improving the delivery, which is something that is often again neglected, because when people approach impact measurement, it's only from one single perspective and dimension of wanting to do this. But it's important to keep in mind that the moment you place customers at the center of your impact measurement approach, they can actually help you both tell you about what impact they're feeling, but also sort of tell you about what can be improved about the service delivery. And the third thing I want to highlight is the fact that lean data as an exercise, we see it as an additive and a burden-free approach. And what that basically means again is the fact that lean data was actually able to complement some of the real-time data that eGov collected, and similar to eGov, we have seen other examples also where some of the MIS data that companies collect can actually be complemented by doing a lean data type exercise where you listen to the customers, because they can make better sense of the patterns that your MIS data may actually show you. So on that note, I'm conscious we don't have much more time, and I do want to keep it interactive and take questions. Just quickly looking at the chat box.
Yeah, Prashant, if it helps, I have them listed at my end. I can read them out, and you and Varun can take the questions.
Yes, please. That'll be very helpful.
Yes. Okay. So in no particular order, I think the first question we got was with regard to state public governance data. How do you work to make data uniform and consistent? As often it's stored in different formats. So.
Yeah, so see, essentially, one of the important aspects of creating a standard infrastructure across the country is to actually standardize how data is collected or analyzed. And I think that is one of the theory of change that we realize, that even in a state, sometimes things like calculation methodology or categorization can be very diverse and complex across multiple cities in a state. And the idea of actually implementing one single platform across a state or probably multiple states is to standardize data collection so that at an aggregate level, you can analyze for better insights.
Great. I think the next question is more, it's about the data collection and the analysis. So I think Ritika asks where and how is the data generated by the survey stored? How are they passed back to clients? And someone else earlier had asked, how is the data analyzed manually or digitally? So if you could just throw light on that process.
Yeah, definitely. So the data is, I mean, I think it's a mixed approach, mainly because the data we collect is semi-structured in nature, which means it is both quantitative and qualitative. Now, all the quantitative data is sort of analyzed through some of the tools that are already available, like Stata, etc. And so we don't use Stata or R, but we have some of our own sort of softwares to actually analyze that. On the qualitative front, there are issues in terms of, you could sort of take the AI way where you have machine learning algorithms to actually, analyze some of the unstructured data, but we've not seen a lot of success with those, and so that's data that we actually still sort of analyze a bit more manually. And what that basically means is that there are people in our team who actually read through the data and actually sort of cull out the most sort of high level buckets that are emerging. And so that, because in our experience, that is likely to still be much more accurate than a machine learning algorithm, which will actually also take time to sort of learn and pick up those patterns. And also because we work with across so many sectors, it's difficult for you to train the algorithm on so many different sectors in the same way. On the more technical question about how data is stored, I mean, what I can say is that we have a office in London, and so that means that we have to be compliant with GDPR. And so those are some of the legal norms that we have to comply with in terms of ensuring that we actually ensure there's privacy, anonymization of the databases, etc. That we do take up.
Great. The next question is pertaining specifically to the responses that you collect from the government representatives that you were sharing. What did you do to reduce biases in the government reps' responses? They might want to come across as satisfied or pleased with the service if that's something that they're measured or if their progress is tracked on.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great question, one that we have to be mindful about. I think the one metric that stood out to me was that even when we did sort of undertake the data collection, we were mindful of that. But the metric around challenges, it was an interesting one, because overall about nearly 40% of all officials experience challenges, and so that meant that they were not afraid to talk about the negative bits of the app, and that sort of made us reassured that that they were sort of sharing the truest sense of their experience. And I think the other important bit is also the fact that that's all the more reason why you need a third party to come and do the data collection, right? Because when we start the survey, we make it very clear that we don't work for eGov, we don't work for the government, and so that creates an important degree of separation between us and the other organizations. And so that's something that's very important for you to establish, so that the person feels that they can be trusted, etc. And the other thing you should also keep in mind is that we keep in mind that is helpful is the fact that we promise them the data that the interview is voluntary, and the data will be anonymized if they want it to be, which means that before that we will speak to them, we will collect exactly what they said, but at the time of sharing that data back with the company, they will not know who actually said it. And so those are again some mechanisms we sort of keep in mind to ensure that there is low bias.
Sure. I think the next question, in the interest of time, we can take one more question. And to the other participants who've had questions coming in, we will try and get them across to the speakers and compile responses in a post-conference summary. So that's something that you can look forward to. So my last question, Prashant, again, I think is very process-oriented, which when collecting data, how do you reach people with, say, no access to technology, no access to phones? I know in the case, in eGov case study, we're specifically talking about the Puraseva app, which is, of course, available on a cellular platform. But if we were to look at people who don't have that access, then what has the 60 decibels worked in that, if you could share?
Yeah, no, definitely. Again, I think a very pertinent question. I think in our experience, working with a variety of different, funds, foundations who primarily invest in extremely low income geographies, we've had the opportunity to really test out lean data in some of those really low resource environment where access to the phone would typically be perceived as difficult. But what I would say from experience is the fact that we have actually managed to interview, women. I'm just giving an example of one study because I feel like it's probably one of the most difficult environments that in which we've been able to deploy lean data, which is an environment where you actually had to interview women goat rearers that actually were doing goat rearing in the state of Bihar, and these are predominantly women. belonging to sort of some of the most low income communities and stuff like that. And even though we had a very low response rate, we were able to still collect about 400 to 500 responses from those participants. And so that sort of goes to show that we have been successful in terms of collecting data. But of course, there is a whole sort of other world where some of the beneficiaries may not have access to phone altogether. And so those, I would say, are some constraints that we try to work around at this point. And in some situations, we have actually resorted to doing in-person collection if it's really required. But typically, sort of we try to sort of first do a pilot to see to what extent is phone service even possible. But yeah, I do recognize that there may be sort of sampling biases in cases where people do not have a phone altogether, though that's not as as common a scenario that one would actually assume, because we've actually deployed these services, as I said, in some of the most poorest parts of Asia and Africa both.
Sure. So yeah, I think we've come to the closing of the session, and I think I just want to thank both Varun and Prashant for taking the time to put this very insightful deck together.